Over the last lectures and the last assignment, we split up our app into multiple components, and now we got a decent looking app where we can add our favorite places. Now, what if we actually want to remove a place though? Let's say by clicking on a place, we want to get rid of it. Now, right now, if we click on the places, obviously nothing happens. Now, let's try a first possible solution. Let's go to our place list component where we have the list items. Let's say if we click a list item, so let's go into our list item component. If we essentially click on that view, so anywhere on that list item, we want to do something. For that, let's add an onPress property to that view here. And there, let's say we want to fire props on item pressed, any prop name you want. Now in the place list, which is where we use our list item, there we can now add this prop to the list item because we just added it to it, and therefore here we can react to it. This should now occur whenever we press the list item in the list item component. And here we could execute an arrow function where we simply throw an alert item pressed ID : and then output the index of the item, which we also used as a key here. So I just split this up over multiple lines. This is the line I just added. Let's see if that works. Let's save this. Notice that my JavaScript hook here is still running, so the app should still get updated. And I will even reload it to be really sure that it works. If I now re-add Munich, nothing happens if I click this, right? The reason is, by default, your views, texts, and so on aren't touchable. You can't register onPress on any component you want. That's not like it works on the web, where you can register on click, on a div, on a span, whatever you want. And even on the web, it's not like the default behavior. Every HTML element simply has a couple of properties and events you can listen to. And the click event happens to be present on pretty much all HTML elements. On React Native, it's the same. Every React Native component has its own set of properties and events. And the view component doesn't happen to have an onPress property or event. You can always confirm this in the documentation. If you go to components and you search for the view component there, if you click on it, there you can scroll down and you will see that as you go over it got a lot of properties you can use. But actually it got no onPress property. To be honest, it got some touch-related properties. All these onResponder things are related to touching. But since manually connecting to this isn't straightforward and you would have to do a lot of heavy lifting, React Native gives you some nice wrapper components which you can wrap around any component you want if you want to react to touch events on it. These components are all called touchable something. Touchable like this is the simplest one. So I import touchable from React Native in my list item component, and I will now wrap my view with touchable like this. Now on touchable, we can register onPress. It does expose this. You can again go back to documentation and have a look at the touchable components you see here. Now touchable is actually the base component. I'll come back to the components you should really use in a second. So that's touchable. Now if we save this and we go back to the application, if I now enter my component there, you see we get an error. The reason for this is that touchable is basically a parent class from which multiple subclasses inherit. For example, touchable without feedback. So let's replace touchable with touchable without feedback and save the list item. Let's now try this again. Let's reload our app here, add Munich, and touch it. And now you see I get this alert. And if I add Munich again and click on that, you see the ID is a different one. And the same for Android, the app is just stuck. If I reload manually, I can add it there too, and also click there to get the alert. So touchable without feedback basically allows us to register touch events on the element it wraps. And you must only have one child element, not adjacent ones. This typically is a view, or often is a view, but theoretically it could also just be a text, doesn't have to be a view. Now, touchable without feedback is named like this because you get no visual feedback when touching. If you inspect its documentation, you see all the properties you can set to determine how long you actually have to press to trigger certain events. And then you see the events like on long press, an alternative to on press, or when the press starts, when it finishes, and so on. So touchable without feedback doesn't give us feedback. We also have touchable highlight. Let's try this out. Let's replace touchable without feedback with touchable highlight. Let's save the file. And now if I click an item, you see that whilst I click it, it actually gets darker. And here also the margin below it gets really dark, really black, which is just how React styles this behind the scenes. The margin counts towards the object and it basically paints the entire object way darker and white just becomes black. Therefore it looks like this. So now we at least get a feedback. What we can also use is touchable opacity. Touchable opacity doesn't change the background color, but the opacity. Now you see that clicking it basically reduces the opacity. So now we get this feedback when we touch it. And the same, by the way, of course, on Android. Now on Android, you might also want to have this ripple effect. And for that, you can use touchable native feedback. So we can use that. If we now save this and we go back to Android, you see we got the ripple effect. And on the right, on iOS, you see it's not supported there. This actually is a component you may only use on Android. And in a later section, I will show you how you can find out on which device you're running on so that you can render this on Android and an alternative on iOS. For now, I will simply revert to touchable opacity because I think that looked the nicest and it works on both platforms. So all these touchable classes have the same events. They just do different things visually. Sometimes you want the without feedback one, sometimes you want opacity. Well, choose whichever one you like. Here I'll go with opacity and now we got a nice feedback. This, by the way, is also how you can create your own buttons. And to be honest, it's just how this button here was created. It's just in the end a text or maybe a view with a text inside of it wrapped with a touchable component. And then the view inside of it is styled like a button. Voila, you're done. That's your finished button. And this is how you can create your own buttons or any other touchable element you want. Keep in mind, touchable opacity and so on, these are the elements which you use if you want to react to some touch events.